The outer rim of the galaxy had been quiet for decades. The Empire's fleets ruled the trade routes, and no one dared challenge their power. But deep in the forgotten archives of Earth's military history, a name was still whispered among a few old veterans: the warship Helios. Built in the last days of the old wars, the Helios was a weapon unlike any other. It was never deployed, never tested in real combat, and after years of political disputes, it was locked away in an abandoned dockyard orbiting a dead moon. Most believed it was scrap metal now, rusting in the dark. Captain Rian Hale was not one of those people. He had heard the stories when he was a young recruit, sitting in dim barracks while older soldiers told tales of a ship so advanced it could outfight entire fleets. Now, as a decorated officer of the Human Defense Command, he knew those stories were his only chance to save his people. The Empire had finally turned its attention toward Earth. Without warning, their massive armada crossed into human space, destroying colonies and silencing outposts. The war had arrived without mercy. In the War Council chamber, the mood was grim. Holograms of burning cities floated above the table. Reports spoke of orbital bombardments and millions of casualties. Rian stood quietly in the corner, watching the desperate arguments. Generals shouted for surrender, others demanded evacuation. But no one had an answer. That was when Rian's voice cut through the noise. "There is one ship," he said, his tone sharp and steady. "It's old, forgotten. But if the stories are true, it can destroy them all." The room fell silent. The generals looked at him like he had lost his mind. "You're talking about a myth," one of them scoffed. "Even if the Helios exists, it's been mothballed for 50 years. It wouldn't even start." Rian met his eyes and replied, "Then we'll make it start. Because if we don't, Earth will burn within." The week. It took 3 days to locate the shipyard. Buried beneath layers of false registry codes and sealed orders, the Helios floated in darkness. Her hull was coated in a thick layer of ice, her engines dead. But the moment Rian stepped into the silent docking bay, he felt something in the air. A presence, a waiting power. She was enormous, far larger than any current human warship. Her lines sleek and predatory, like a blade forged for war. The engineers they brought along shook their heads in disbelief. "This isn't a warship," one whispered. "It's a fortress." But they also warned it would take days to even wake her systems. Rian didn't have days. The Empire's fleet had already reached the edge of the Sol system. They had maybe 30 hours before the first alien warships entered Earth's orbit. While the crew scrambled to work, Rian explored the Helios. Her corridors were lined with strange, dark alloy that seemed to hum faintly when touched. The ship's AI core, long dormant, flickered to life as they connected emergency power. A voice, calm and cold, echoed through the command deck. "Designation, Helios. Command authority required." Rian stepped forward and placed his hand on the control panel. "Captain Rian Hale, Human Defense Command," he said. The eye paused, scanning him, then replied, "Authority granted." "Weapon systems online." The sudden roar of engines shook the dockyard. Blue light blazed from the thrusters, cutting through decades of darkness. Crew members stared in awe as dormant weapon arrays unfolded along the hull, massive plasma cannons, missile batteries, and something none of them recognized, a weapon that seemed to bend light itself around its core. The Helios was awake, and she was hungry. Back on Earth, panic spread as Imperial forces destroyed the defense satellites at the edge of the system. Civilian ships fled in chaotic streams, but the alien fleet was too fast. They moved like a storm, swallowing everything in their path. The Empire's commander, a cold-eyed alien named Kareth Voss, transmitted a single message to Earth's leaders: "Submit to Imperial authority, or your planet will be reduced to ash." Rian stood on the bridge of the Helios, watching the incoming fleet on the tactical display. The sheer number of enemy ships was staggering. Hundreds of warships, each larger than a city, supported by countless fighters. Any normal human fleet would be obliterated in minutes. But Rian was not leading a normal fleet. He was leading the Helios. The AI's voice broke the silence. Enemy fleet will enter firing range in 3 minutes. Recommend immediate strike. Rian's crew looked to him for orders. He took a deep breath. His eyes locked on the massive holographic projection of the Empire's flagship. Bring all weapons online, he said. Let's remind the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far. Asterisk. The bridge of the Helios glowed with pale blue light as weapon systems came alive. Panels lit up with streams of targeting data, enemy formations, and firing solutions. The hum of the ship's power core was deep and steady, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant now awakened. Every crew member felt the same thing, a strange mix of fear and awe. They were about to face an entire Empire's armada with a single warship. Rian studied the tactical hologram. The enemy fleet was splitting into 3 spearhead formations, each designed to overwhelm different sectors of defense. He knew that any conventional fleet would have no hope against this strategy, but the Helios wasn't conventional. Target their lead formation, he ordered calmly. We'll cut off the head before the body even sees us coming. BI's voice echoed in the bridge. Primary weapon charged. Chrono Lance at full capacity. Rian didn't know exactly what the Chrono Lance was, only that it was classified even to most military leaders. Now its cylindrical emitter extended from the Helios hull, glowing with an intense white-blue light. Fire, Rian commanded. The shot wasn't like any weapon the crew had seen before. A beam of distorted light lanced across the void, bending space around it. It struck the lead alien dreadnought, and for a fraction of a second, it seemed nothing happened. Then the entire ship disintegrated, not in an explosion, but in a sudden erasure, as if time itself had been pulled away from its hull. The massive vessel simply ceased to exist. Shock rippled across the crew. The alien fleet staggered in confusion. Dozens of their ships broke formation, scrambling to respond. The communications officer reported incoming transmissions, the Empire's commanders shouting orders, disbelief in their voices. Rian allowed himself a tight smile. Let them be confused. Keep firing. The Helios secondary weapons opened. Up. Plasma bolts the size of transport shuttles ripped through enemy cruisers, while guided missiles chased down smaller corvettes, detonating in brilliant bursts of orange and blue. Enemy fighter swarms tried to rush the warship, but automated point defense turrets cut them down with ruthless precision. It was like watching a predator tear through a flock of helpless prey. From the Empire's flagship, Kareth Voss watched in fury. The human ship was moving faster than their sensors could track, striking and vanishing before return fire could land. He slammed his clawed hand on the command rail. Find that ship's weakness, he growled. I want it torn apart before. The hour is out, but the Helios was not giving them the hour. Rian pushed the engines to full power, diving straight into the center of the enemy fleet. The inertial dampeners groaned under the strain as the ship spun and weaved between massive alien capital ships. Every few seconds, another enemy vessel vanished under Chrono Lance fire, while others were ripped apart by coordinated salvos. Crew moved as one, following Rian's orders without hesitation. For a moment, the battle looked one-sided. But then, alarm screamed across the bridge. The eye spoke quickly. Multiple warp signatures detected. Reinforcement fleet inbound. Estimated arrival in 90 seconds. The crew froze. The Empire was bringing in another full strike force, possibly even larger than the first. And this time, they would be ready for the Helios. Rian's eyes narrowed. He knew they couldn't win a battle of attrition. The Helios was powerful, but it was still one ship. What's the fastest way to disable their command network? He asked, The eye processed for less than a second. Elimination of the flagship will result in 72% drop in fleet coordination. Rian's gaze shifted to the massive alien command vessel on the tactical map. It was the largest ship he had ever seen, a floating city bristling with weaponry. And now it was his target. The crew tensed as the Helios broke formation and aimed directly at the flagship. Enemy ships tried to block their path, but the chronolance cut through them like paper. Missile salvos cleared the way, leaving trails of shattered hulls and drifting wreckage. The flagship loomed closer, its energy shields glowing under the strain of incoming fire. Rian stood at the center of the bridge, voice steady. Prepare for point-blank strike. No warnings. No mercy. The Empire's flagship was a monster of steel and shadow, its dark armor glinting under the light of distant suns. It moved with a slow, terrible confidence, dwarfing every ship around it. Hundreds of turrets swiveled toward the Helios, and glowing lances of plasma erupted from its flanks. The void between the two ships became a storm of deadly fire. The Helios danced through the barrage, rolling and weaving with impossible precision. The inertial dampeners screamed under the strain, but Rian didn't flinch. Keep moving, he ordered, his voice calm but unyielding. If we stop for a second, we're dead. The AI responded instantly, plotting evasive paths that slipped them through the narrowest gaps in the enemy's attack. Every time the Helios fired, another alien cruiser fell. The chronolance punched holes in the flagship's escort line, erasing entire ships in silence. Missile batteries rained destruction on frigates trying to flank them. But the flagship's shields were holding, and each second brought more enemy. Fire! The crew felt the deck shudder under repeated hits, though the armor still held firm. Inside the flagship, Kareth Voss paced the command deck. His eyes locked on the human warship that refused to die. Close the trap, he snarled. Smaller alien vessels surged forward, trying to box the Helios in. The human ship responded by diving straight into the densest cluster of enemies, its guns blazing in every direction. The void lit up with explosions, debris spinning into the darkness. Rian knew they had to break through before the reinforcements arrived. Target their shield generators, he ordered. The AI highlighted weak points along the flagship's hull. The Helios shifted course, its massive cannons firing in perfect rhythm. One by one, the alien generators flared and died, their shield bubble flickering with instability. The moment the last one failed, the flagship was exposed. Chronolance at full charge, the AI announced. Rian gripped the command rail, eyes locked on the glowing heart of the enemy ship. Fire! The beam tore through the void, twisting. Light around it. It struck the flagship dead center, and a massive section of its forward hull simply vanished, ripped out of time. Fires erupted inside, and secondary explosions tore through its decks, but the flagship was not beaten yet. From the jagged wound in its side, a super weapon began to emerge. A colossal cannon with a barrel as long as the Helios itself. Energy built within it, glowing like a star being born. The AI's voice turned sharp. Impact from that weapon will destroy us in one shot. Rian didn't blink. Then we hit them before they fire. The Helios roared forward, closing the distance at terrifying speed. Enemy fighters swarmed to intercept, but point defense turrets shredded them in seconds. The crew felt the deck rattle as alien plasma fire grazed their hull, scorching the armor. The flagship's cannon was seconds from firing when the Helios main batteries unleashed everything they had. Missiles, plasma, and the chronolance struck together in a blinding wave of destruction. The alien superweapon shattered in a cascade of explosions, chain reacting through the flagship's power core. The massive vessel's hull split apart, and a shockwave rippled through space, tearing nearby ships into pieces. On the Helios bridge, the crew stared at the burning wreckage in stunned silence. Rian's voice was low but steady. The head of the serpent is gone. Now we cut down the rest. Asterisk. The wreckage of the Empire's flagship drifted in silence, pieces of twisted metal glowing faintly as they tumbled into the darkness. The crew of the Helios had no time to celebrate. Long-range sensors lit up with dozens of new contacts. The reinforcement fleet had arrived, bigger and heavier than the first wave. The IS voice was calm but urgent. 72 hostile vessels detected. Estimated engagement in 2 minutes. Rian studied the tactical display. This was no scattered formation. It was a wall of steel and firepower. Battleships, carriers, and heavy cruisers moved in perfect coordination. The Empire had learned from their earlier losses. This time, they were here to crush the Helios with overwhelming force. "We can't fight them head-on," said Commander Vale, his second-in-command. "We'll be torn apart before we close the distance." Rian's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't fight them head-on." The Helios AI brought up a simulation. "There is one option. Probability of survival. 18%. The crew tensed as the plan appeared on the screen. A high-speed charge through the enemy's formation, using the chrono lance to punch a corridor straight through their center, then detonating the warship's experimental Nova mines to collapse the enemy's warp lanes. It was suicidal, but it would trap the entire fleet in this sector. Rian didn't hesitate. Set course. The crew moved quickly, strapping into their stations as the Helios engines roared. The ship surged forward, a streak of blue fire cutting across the void. Enemy vessels opened fire immediately, filling space with glowing streams of plasma and missile trails. The Helios weaved and rolled, its turrets answering with deadly precision. Each shot cleared a small path, but the wall of enemy ships grew closer by the second. They hit the front line like a thunderbolt. The chrono lance cut through the lead battleship, erasing it from existence. Missile salvos tore open carriers, spilling fighters into space before they could launch. Plasma beams slashed through cruisers, turning their armor to molten slag. Every few seconds, another enemy ship exploded in brilliant light. But the Helios took hits too. Shields flared and dimmed, armor plates cracked, and warning lights flashed red across the bridge. As they pushed deeper into the formation, the crew could feel the strain. "Shields at 37%, reported the defense officer. "Engine temperatures critical." The eye announced, "Nova mines armed." Rian gave the order, "Deploy on my mark." They reached the center of the enemy formation, surrounded on all sides by ships trying to close in for the kill. "Mark," Rian said. The Helios dropped the Nova mines and accelerated out of the kill zone. The AI initiated the detonation sequence. Behind them, a blinding white explosion blossomed in the void. Not just heat and fire, but a violent ripple in space itself. Enemy ships were hurled into one another, torn apart by collapsing gravity wells. Warp signatures vanished as the Nova blast sealed the sector's exit points. When the light faded, the enemy fleet was in chaos. Dozens of ships were gone, and the survivors were trapped. Rian's crew watched the tactical display as their enemies scrambled with no escape. "They're cut off from reinforcements," Vale said, his voice almost in disbelief. Rian nodded slowly. "Then we finish this before anyone else comes looking." The aftermath of the Nova detonation left the battlefield glowing with drifting wreckage and dying embers of destroyed ships. The Helios moved like a predator through the debris, its sensors scanning for survivors. The Empire's fleet was broken and scattered, their once perfect formation reduced to fragments. Rian knew they had to strike now, before the enemy could regroup. The crew worked with practiced precision. Targeting data flowed across the bridge, each lock followed by a quick, deadly strike. Plasma bolts ripped apart crippled battleships. Missiles hunted down fleeing corvettes, and the chrono lance erased the few vessels still trying to mount resistance. It was a clean, relentless sweep. "No survivors in this sector," reported the tactical officer. "Moving to next grid." Rian gave a single nod. Keep going. But as the Helios moved deeper into the wreckage field, strange readings began to appear on the sensors. The IS voice grew sharper. Unidentified energy signatures detected. Source unknown. The crew leaned in, studying the display. At first, it looked like drifting debris, large, dark shapes among the broken ships. Then those shapes began to move. They emerged from the shadows like nightmares, black armored warships unlike anything in the Empire's known arsenal. Their hulls absorbed light, their weapons glowing with a deep red energy. The AI confirmed what Rian already suspected. These are not standard Imperial vessels. Data suggests experimental strike platforms, possibly from the Emperor's personal fleet. Rian's jaw tightened. So he's been holding back his real weapon until now. The new ships advanced in perfect silence, no hails, no warnings. Then their weapons ignited. Streams of red energy lanced across the void, cutting through wreckage and slamming into the Helios shields. The entire bridge shook under the impact. Shields at 52%, the defense officer reported. Damage on decks 5 and 6. Rian didn't waste time. Return fire. Target their weapon emitters. The battle erupted instantly. The Helios fired every weapon it had, but the black ships moved with unnatural speed, their hulls warping and twisting space around them. Even direct hits from the chronolance didn't fully erase them. The beams seemed to bend around their armor, leaving only partial damage. It was the first time the crew had seen anything stand against their primary weapon. The enemy's counterfire was brutal. Plasma blasts tore open parts of the Helios outer hull, forcing emergency bulkheads to seal. 2 of the black ships closed in from opposite sides, trying to trap them. Rian's voice was calm but edged with steel. They're trying to pin. US, break their formation. Hard turn to starboard, full engine burn. The Helios roared forward, slipping between the 2 ships with meters to spare, its cannons blasting both as they passed. They destroyed one of the enemy vessels in a burst of white flame, but the rest kept coming. The IS analysis was grim. They are coordinating to drive us toward the central battleship. Energy readings suggest a super weapon. Rian glanced at the display. The central ship was massive, its weapon core glowing like a captured star. If that thing fires, Vale said quietly, this battle is over. Rian's reply was cold and certain. Then we end it before they can. The Emperor's flagship dominated the darkness ahead, its black armor absorbing all light, its weapon core burning like a sun trapped in chains. Even at this distance, the energy spikes from its super weapon made the Helios sensors scream. The AI's calm voice broke through the tension. Estimated time to weapon discharge, 2 minutes. Rian knew there would be no second chance. All power to forward shields and engines, he ordered. We take them head on. The crew strapped in as the Helios accelerated, closing the gap in a streak of blue fire. Enemy escorts swarmed to intercept, but the warship's guns tore through them in blinding flashes. The chronolance fired again and again, erasing anything that blocked their path. The flagship's outer guns opened fire, massive bursts of red plasma slamming into the Helios. The deck shuddered, lights flickered, and the smell of burning insulation filled the air. Shields at 29%, the defense officer called out. Hull breach on deck 7, contained. Rian didn't slow. Ignore the damage. Get me into firing range. They broke through the last line of escorts with seconds to spare. The flagship loomed ahead, its weapon core flaring brighter than ever. The AI confirmed it. Enemy weapon at maximum charge. Rian's voice was steady. Lock the chronolance on their core. Overload it. Vale stared at him. Overload will burn out the weapon completely. Rian's eyes didn't leave the target. If we don't, none of us live. The Helios main gun roared with impossible light. the beam twisting through space until it struck the flagship's heart. For a moment, the black armor resisted, then the core destabilized, collapsing in on itself before exploding outward in a blinding wave. The shockwave tore the flagship to pieces, its fragments scattering like burning ash into the void. Enemy fleet faltered instantly. Without the Emperor's command, their coordination collapsed. Some ships fled, others powered down their weapons entirely. The Helios drifted through the debris, its hull scarred and smoking, but alive. On the bridge, no one spoke for several seconds. Then Vale turned to Rian with a faint smile. "It's over." Rian exhaled slowly, finally letting the weight leave his shoulders. For now, the victory message was broadcast to every human. Colony and outpost. The name Helios was no longer a forgotten myth. It was a legend reborn. Across the galaxy, the Empire's surviving forces withdrew, knowing that humanity had a weapon they could never again underestimate. And in the silent dockyards of Earth, Rian looked out at the stars, already wondering when the Helios would be called upon again.